Ones. I'm more gravity. Let's look at a nice game of chess. I finished this game about 5 minutes ago. Um, no, sorry, I finished my last game against this opponent 5 minutes ago. This game was maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes before that. Um, I almost always review games that I win. This is a game I lost. Um, but there's some interesting caveats in how I got to that loss. And I also want to, in exchange for reviewing a loss, which I usually don't like doing, right? In exchange for that, I want to be able to analyze this at times as if it were part of a tournament, a classical time controlled tournament, or slow time controlled tournament. I'll be adding perspective to that on top of the moves and variations and so on. Let's get going. I had the white pieces: e4, c5, knight f3, and with d6. This is the Sicilian defense. I think this is going to lead to a dragon. Is that right? A knight arf would have been different. I'm not exactly sure. I know that white's aim is to pry open the center with the move d4. That's one of the main reasons. Get things going and active, and black often captures on d4 even. It's a little bit of a mistake because then white has an active piece and a pawn and more space. But noting that it's not a bad mistake, as the pawn on c5 has been developed to c5 because his whole aim is to capture white's d pawn and leave black with the possibility of two central pawns against white's lone central pawn. I don't know, I'm drawing lines from the king to the pawn for some reason, but that's how I chose to do that. The main purpose of the Sicilian 1 dot 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 c5 is most often to use a flank pawn and exchange it for one of these very valuable central pawns. It'd be better off in the center. Okay, G6 here. Yeah, the response D takes C5 is fine here. Open things up. My opponent wanted to develop his queen instead of having this D takes C6 and then an exchange of queens on D8. Yeah, that's at least my interpretation. So keep the queens on the board makes for usually a wilder game. Knight c3 is the best move, and then the queen captures the pawn on c5. You see this queen developed early like this. She's, in the words of Joe Montana Sports Talk Football, she's wide open. She's really, in chess, she's just out here ready to be attacked. In the football game, is ready to catch a pass and run it in for a touchdown and attack. But anyway, the queen's being attacked, the wide receivers attacking, whatever. Because I played the best move, and that's bishop to e3. Attacking the queen. She's going to spend time to go somewhere else, where I think after a5 and then c3. I mean, she could have gone here so many moves ago, and just look at how many moves my opponent is playing with his queen. Let's see. Move 4, queen a5 check. Move 5, queen takes c5. Move 6, queen c7. 3 of the first 6 moves. Don't play like that. You're going to get outdeveloped, like I was outdeveloping my opponent in this game. I'll even include the pawn there because it's a central pawn and he's claiming space and all that. So we're almost at the point. Yeah, I think I messed up something tactical here. Stockfish sees e5 as the best move, and then probably white has some sort of forced tactic, capturing with the knight on e5, then placing the bishop on d4. Pawn's protected, and we're skewering black's queen and rook. So that's best play. I missed that. I played bishop b5 check. Is a decent move anyway. And bishop d7 blocks well. And again, this theme: attack your opponent's queen. Attack your opponent's queen. In these situations, you get a nice outpost, developed bishop, all with tempo. And black is just suffering from extreme need to develop his back rank pieces. Got a castle in and all that. This is weakness. This is weakness. Queen d8, queen d3. It's good things in mind, but white has even better. Like I said, from the point of view of a tournament, a slow classical time control tournament, I might take time in this position even. If I have time, spend it. Queen d3 is fine, but we've got outposts on the 5th rank. We've got pieces developed like you could shake a stick at. We've got a diagonal that's looking straight at this undefended rook on h8. We've got castling to occur, perhaps. All of these things say to me that even if queen d3 ends up being the move, there are other moves to be considered. Even tricky moves. Like, why would we consider bishop to c5? Well, because it's a move. And it's not a good move, but it's also maybe an interesting try. Actually, doesn't look like it should be a good move, but what about bishop c5? And then I'm going to tell the computer, play pawn takes c5. And do we have maybe a tricky way at mate here? No, because the queen can take the knight undeterred. Alright, this isn't happening anyway, despite the pin. Alright, so this is some of the thinking that we work out in our minds that move wasn't going to be all that good for us. I erase these extra moves. I like to delete these moves. I don't know why. Keep the game register clean, and I'm fine with that. So queen d3 was a fine move anyway. a6, 2 passive. These pieces, 7 out of the 8 back rank pieces are on their starting squares. And we realize that the queen has made forays and returned back to her starting square. But this is 7 out of 8 pieces on the 8th rank for black. I'm gonna win this. I could throw pieces away. Not away, but I could pretty much start a very serious sacrificial attack and probably be okay for it. Instead, I did find the best move here. Hey, pat on my back, pat on my own back there. So even if I lose my bishop on b5, I gain the exchange with queen takes h8, and I'm not worried about any kind of counterattack, not with all these pieces on the back rank, just to beat a dead b8 there. Knight to c6, fine. I'll grab your rook. If you want to grab my bishop, I'll grab this knight, and things work out tactically from here on for white. Just exchange where things are unclear. Threatening mate. Now, yes, my opponent could capture on b5 again, and then it's mate. So threatening mate stalls the attack of the a6 pawn on the b5 bishop. With threatening mate, black has to deal with this somehow first. So the queen comes to e7, threatening the pawn on e4, but it doesn't matter. Maybe it matters a little bit, but I'm just going to exchange that many more pieces on the board and have a huge material victory. Queen's got to go. So they go, and then in dusting up over here, black loses the opportunity to dust up on the b file. And were it to be dusting up on the b file, then black loses the opportunity to dust up at f8, and my bishop is escaping in at least two reasonable and fruitful ways. I would escape to d6 to capture the pawn all the while. Why not? Bishop takes c6. And so yeah, I talked about tournament chess. Even go after the castles. Tournament chess. In a classical time controls tournament, I mean, it's always up to the individual whether or not to resign. But no one would hold it against you if you resigned full rook down and with queens gone. And I mean, black's got double pawns. So you could resign or not resign. In online blitz chess, my opponent chose to play on, which, as frustrating as that can be, it's probably the best choice some of the time. Up to the individual. So respectfully, I agree with his decision to continue to play even a whole rook down and everything. Mostly because he won. You saw it there. Black won this game. So we'll see how we get there in just a moment. He did. He won against a position that was, I thought, mostly had been traded down, and white was ahead by a lot of material. See how he did this? That this position, the main reason my opponent won is clock. 2 minutes and 9 seconds to 1 minute and 8 seconds. My opponent has not used as much of his clock. So I'm fine in time spread like this. My king feels protected and safe enough against the files. He's on a dark square with a light squared bishop against him. I can this pawn on c3 is, he's not getting attacked, at least not anytime soon. And even then, the king can come to d2 and help defend. The rook, because the rook has the d8 squared cover. I'm thinking white's doing pretty darn well here. So within that, I say, well, I'll just kind of clean up a few more pawns, let the situation clarify itself. And this was 2 pawns for 1, right? I'm pretty sure there's 2, there's 3. No, there's 2 against 1, 3 against 1, 3 against 2. So it's 3 pawns for 2, not 2 for 1, but also a good deal for white. Have an extra pawn. This is just totally 1. Let's see, how did I botch this? What did I do? On less than a minute of time? Yes, I know that time was part that clock. Sorry, clock. Good thing I changed time to initiative. Clock was I'm behind on the clock. Let's do our analysis. I don't like analyzing while the king's in check, so we'll go to whose turn should it be? Want something relative. Okay, let's go to this. It's white to move. The material is obviously in favor of white. Initiative, I'd say maybe black has a slight lead because of these pawns are just going to be rolling down here as black throws anything he can against the white king and the white king's position. So we have material, initiative, mobility. Probably black slightly. And white has the better rook, but black's rook is pretty darn good, and he has the black also has the long range piece on the minor piece side of things. So we'll say mobility's a slight edge to black. Clock definitely in favor of black. He's using his time, and now has some bank of time to use if necessary. Space. Black has better space. Just 3, 4, and against 1 in terms of space. You might count that the white rook owns the d file, but still black has better space here. Initiative. Did we cover initiative? Let's see. Material, mobility, space, king safety. Black has better king safety. Clock. And that if I'm goofing up on one of those, then king safety, space, material, mobility, clock, and initiative. I think we covered all of that. Overall, White's still winning because his White's material lead, 5 points here, is huge. All the other edges and leads are maybe except for clock. All the other edges and leads are slight to moderate. I'd say the clock lead is moderate. But there's enough of them in Black's favor. I think 3 or 4 in Black's favor. 1 was indeterminate, more or less, and White has a huge advantage in material. So maybe this is a good reason why my opponent plays on here. For whatever reason, he did, and we play with Rook takes f6. Let's see. So let's see. I'm capturing another pawn on a6. I'm just really padding this material lead. We went through these moves before, but we'll just move like Rook c2. My opponent is accumulating small advantages. It's just the best move on the board. It doesn't win the game, but now after the white king steps away and my opponent plays Rook takes f2, it's not as clear. It's just not as clear. The threat of Rook takes g2 followed by Bishop takes f3 or some sort of combination related to that is bothersome for White. Let's see how much time I took. So yeah, it's bothersome for White. It took me 7 seconds, which at this stage of the game is a lot of time to spend on any one move. It took me 7 seconds to play the blunder Rook to d1. And we see here on the side, Stockfish believes Rook to g1 is good, which actually looks fine to me too. It's solid. If my opponent captures the knight and I recapture, and then the Rook captures the pawn, then and with check even, but then I've given up a knight and a pawn for a bishop, which usually isn't a fair trade at this stage of the game, being ahead of Rook. And to clarify things, fantastic. That's one of them. That would be like the main thing for White to look for. So Stockfish has that move on the ready right away, and instead I play this blunder Rook d1. Gonna lose this pawn right out, and also while allowing my knight on f3's defense to be undermined. Right, so White has White took one on the chin there, and this is just an outright piece blunder. Knight to g5. Under time pressure, people make mistakes. 34 seconds left. I make this horrible mistake. My opponent capitalizes on it. The game's not over quite yet. But that's from Searching for Bobby Fischer. His son plays his dad. It's one of the memorable lines. In my opinion, it was one of the memorable lines from that movie. I played Rook to d7. I'm just dropping these mistakes and blunders all over. And, my opponent solidifies things on the defensive end of f7 while attacking my king. So I'm in check. Things are solidified. Taking the piece off doesn't work because then Black gains the exchange, and the board after that is even in favor of Black, which is not even the story as I have 27 seconds and my opponent has a minute and 18 seconds, clock will be the story after such a line. I gave the exchange away, and so this is where we are. Clock is going to be the story. I'm looking to just make one-off attacks, maybe try to get in control of the pre-move war, or the race towards pre-moves. My opponent makes the best move, rook to h3. You want to get in front of this pawn. Usually you want to get behind our own. Black would want to get behind his own pawns, or behind his enemy pawns. In this case, however, in front of the pawn is clearly winning the h2 pawn, and then it's just over for white. Probably yeah, we're talking about resigning. I might resign. Why not? The game's not going to last more than a minute from here. And I learned that a lot of players like to play to the very end. And I didn't feel like it. I, at this point, lost some games against this same opponent. It felt like riding the wave of contempt for a little while. Contempt, by the way, even in computer programming, the term contempt refers to how much a player is against draws, really. If you have 100% contempt, you won't play for a draw. You always play through it. If it occurs, it could still occur over a forced threefold repetition, for instance. But contempt means you really, let's get this guy, gosh. And an even amount of contempt means basically we let the board decide whether or not it's a draw. Trying to maybe shake things up with a7, and this is well, that was, you'll see that, we'll see here, that was not the move for black. This was a bad blunder. Black's turn to move, just keep pushing this pawn. He can't be assailed in either direction. The king's, way far away from it. This pawn should just go and go and go until h1. If I push a7, my opponent's maybe scared that I'll push a7 to a8 and promote to queen. But my rook does not have control of a8. So I think maybe push this pawn. Well, you still lose the rook. Maybe, let's look at this. I think rook a6, right? Takes white's king 2 moves to even poke fun at the rook on a6. He can just drop all the way back to a1 there. White's rook is kind of strangely out of the action while amidst it all. He's not protecting. Look at all these things. White's rook is not protecting the a8 square. White's rook is blocked on the b file. White's rook is blocked once and then again on the 7th rank. This is just about the most active rook one could possibly imagine to have almost no influence on this position. Right? You can't deny it's an active rook here. He's right in the midst of things, but each and every one of his ways to be effective are just not going to happen. So here, either rook for black, it's black's turn. Rook a6 or even rook a1 first. Make white chase to b2 and then go to a6. Sometimes demonstrates the point. I like rook a6 here. And this, giving up the rook, things are pretty much even from a tournament point of view. But once again, like I said, tournament chess, we usually assume that players have a reasonable amount of time. The time controls, classical time controls are also slow because that's the point. Get the best chess out of everything. And so in a tournament view, you know, probably this is a difficult and technical endgame for either side to prove. So to that effect, we have Stockfish here to tell us that white is ahead by a little bit. How can white be ahead by a little bit? It's pawns against a rook. Who knows? You know, sometimes who knows? H3. Move back all the way to A1. Covering the queening square. And with the right moves, maybe there's a draw. But I'm going to time out so long as the game hasn't reached checkmate or a drawn position like stalemate or threefold reposition. I'm going to time out under any condition where black still has control over any one pawn or more, or perhaps it's been promoted and then that draws the day. That's called timeout against. This is natural timeout. Frankly, you could say it's timeout against sufficient material, but people don't really say that. It's just standard timeout. Alright, so here, yeah. After the king moves, the rook is gone and everything. This is a crazy game. Yeah. Right, so there's the graph of the game there. Like I said, I might not have said this. This game was not accurate, not very accurate overall. It was a wild game, quick time controls. Yeah, so that's all right. Gravitrons. I will be working on the ums. I know I say a lot. So just bear with me, and soon enough I will be parsing my time without all of the ums. Anyway, Gravitrons, thank you all for watching. I'm More Gravity. Have a great night.